is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories.
We are digging our own graves.
Dire warnings as world leaders gather in Glasgow to confront the climate emergency.
China pledges to wean itself off fossil fuels as the country gears up to reach carbon neutrality by 2060.
The UK warns France it has 48 hours to back down in the row about post-Brexit fishing rights, or it will take legal action.
And the United States Treasury Secretary denies putting pressure on Ireland to sign last month's global corporation tax deal. The eyes of the world are on the Scottish city of Glasgow as the COP26 climate conference gets underway.
Delegates from around 200 countries are set to discuss a global response to the climate emergency. Several leaders, including UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, have made impassioned pleas for speedy action.
And the key message from the early speakers so far that the 1.5 degrees Celsius target is an absolute priority.
We can keep the goal of limiting global warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius within our reach if we come together.
2 degrees more and we jeopardise the food supply for hundreds of millions of people as crops wither, locusts swarm. 3 degrees and you can add more wildfires and cyclones, twice as many, 5 times as many droughts and 36 times as many heat waves.
Enough of brutalizing biodiversity. Enough of killing ourselves with carbon. Enough of treating nature like a toilet. Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves.
1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Juliet Mann at Glasgow for us. Juliet, we heard there from the US President, the UK Prime Minister and the United Nations President. Xi couldn't be at the summit today, but he has released a statement. What did he say?
That's right. He couldn't be here. He hasn't left China since 2020 amid the coronavirus pandemic. But he has sent a written statement. And in that, he said that there really should be a consolidated global effort, that really there's a growing urgency to address climate change and the climate emergency. And so what needs to happen at COP26 are 3 things. First of all, that everyone should consolidate their multilateral ties. In other words, build on arrangements and conversations that they've already got going. Second thing is to take some concrete action. Yeah, they've talked about it, they've made commitments. But in honouring those commitments, the third thing is he thinks that we should really push and accelerate the pace of the green transition. Now, if you think that sounds familiar, well, it is, because that's a very key message that we're hearing from all of the world leaders. But why it's important is that it's coming from President Xi, because yes, China has sent a high-level delegation here, but it makes a big difference when you have the leader, the president of China, who's making his mark. Because even though there's a lot of chatter here about how the world is in this together, everyone's in this together, what you have to remember is that the United States, China, the world's biggest polluters, the EU, India, Australia, Japan, these are countries that need to be involved in the conversation. They're crucial, they're pivotal to any commitments being made. So he also quoted an old ancient Chinese belief. He said that successful governance relies on solid action. So chiming in there with a lot of other world leaders, Jamie.
World leaders are promising a lot today and in coming days. How are they being received by the delegates?
Well, let's talk about what Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, said. He said this is about four things, didn't he? Coal, cars, cash and trees. So, OK, coal, phasing out coal faster, investing much more in renewables. He talks about cars, that shift to electric transport. Trees, and clearly that's about reversing deforestation and investing in ecological conversation, which is something that President Xi also mentioned there. And of course cash, and this is the big one. It's all about the money. Committing funding, not just saying here's a random abstract figure, but making it work, helping the poorer nations meet their obligations as well. So it's a bit of an investment opportunity. It's give and take. Now, businesses here, they're mainly on the sidelines. They're not part of those main negotiations, but they've got a big opportunity here too. We've got the sponsors, sure, but we've got a lot of conversations going on in Glasgow City itself and outside, looking at how we can make cities smarter, looking at how enterprises, not just the big multinationals, but accountancy firms, dentists, how they can make their operations greener and cleaner. I think the frustration for a lot of the delegates here is that while we can have these conversations, they're not sure if there's actually going to be any action. What they want to see is more ambitious action. Nicola Sturgeon, peripheral, yes, she's the First Minister of Scotland. I bumped into her earlier and dazzling everyone in her fuchsia two-piece. She said that everyone needs to feel uncomfortable here. Need to get to that point where everyone feels they've got to be pushed harder and pushed faster. So they want bigger ambitions. And I had the chance to sit down with Lord Adair Turner. Now, of course, former head of the CBI now. He's the chair of the Energy Transition Commission. He's got 25 years in green climate finance in that realm. He really has got some strong green credentials. And he said, you know what, he's managed to be here at COP26 both an optimist and a pessimist at the same time. Take a listen.
Look, I think we've left it too late in the sense of we knew that climate change was a problem, in all probability 20 years ago. 10 years ago, we were highly certain. We could have got on 10 years earlier with the technological developments and the deployments that we're now doing. But in fact, we've had 10 years of continually rising emissions. And this does mean we're running out of time. On the other hand, the good news is that over the last 10 years, we have had remarkable breakthroughs in many of the technologies which will help us solve this. The cost of solar photovoltaic electricity is down 85 or 90% in 10 or 12 years. Wind is down 60%. Batteries down 85%. Electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen are coming down. So the last 10 years has been a funny balance between running out of time but increasing confidence that we do have the technologies at low cost that can solve a very large proportion of this problem.
But governments, businesses, specialists, everyone needs to sign up to this. Over the weekend, G20, disappointing. Have you got your optimist or your pessimist hats on? I mean, how does it lay the groundwork for COP?
Yeah. I think the G20 was disappointing because there were rumours in advance that there would be a clear communique committing the world to get to around net zero by mid-century, and that was not, as I understand it, in the final language. So, look, we come into COP26, I think, worried as to whether there is enough momentum. A lot of good things have happened over the last 2 years, from the US, from China, from Europe, but there needs to be more. My suspicion is that we will make some more progress on the political side, but most of the good news will be on corporate commitments and sector commitments, where there is a lot of good action occurring in the shipping sector, the steel sector, the cement sector, these global industries beginning to make commitments to get to net zero by 2050.
Let's talk about the $100 billion question, or perhaps it's a $300 billion question, or maybe a $600 billion question. It's important to have some commitments on finances.
Well, look, I think what we need is clarity about what we mean by financial flows, because I think a lot of people lock on to 100 billion and they're not quite sure what they're talking about there. Order of magnitude, the world will need a couple of trillion investment per annum to build the zero carbon economy which is possible by 2050, by mid-century. Most of that will be provided by the private sector responding to incentives. And that figure, 2 trillion, it compares with about 25 trillion of investment every year in the economy at the moment. So it's not daunting, but there has to be policies that encourage it, regulations, carbon pricing. At the other end of the scale, and most of that will earn a good return, people will make good return from it. That's not about charity, that's not about subsidy, that's about support. There's then within that a figure which is several hundreds of billions, which is money which has to flow from the rich developed world to bits of the emerging market, but still to get a return on investment. And this is the role of the multilateral development blanks and what's called blended finance of public and private together to support renewable energy investments in India or Indonesia. But again, that's not subsidy, that is financial flow. And then, within that, you get many tens of billions, and maybe 100 billion, which is specific subsidies, helping Indonesia or India exit existing coal plants before end of useful life. Now that, you're not going to get a good return on, you're going to have to pay for that to happen, and you're going to have to help those countries with the transitions. So I think this debate about finance, people fail to realise that they move between these different figures. Is it 100 billion, a trillion? Not being clear that, you know, there are different figures that relate to different elements of the challenge.
One of the biggest targets at COP26 is to limit the rate of global warming. There's been a lot of talk about the significance of 1.5 degrees Celsius. It might sound like a small number, but it's one with immense implications for the planet. Scientists have compared global average temperatures to those from around 150 years ago, often called pre-industrial levels. Now, the world is around 1 degree warmer. Experts say this is mainly due to human activity, increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But warming is happening even faster than scientists previously thought. In August, the United Nations Climate Change Panel said the increase in global temperatures had already reached 1.2 degrees. The Secretary-General called it a red alert for our planet. World leaders agreed a limit of a 1.5 degree increase at COP21 in Paris in 2015. That is the threshold that scientists say we must stay below. Based on current projections, the world could reach this critical level by the end of the decade. And if the target is breached and warming goes over 2 degrees Celsius, the impacts of the climate crisis would be even more severe, with extreme heat, flooding, ice sheets melting faster and increased sea levels. The same UN report says the planet is heading towards warming 2.7 degrees by the end of the century, and warns that these effects will be felt most by poorer countries. So the higher the temperature, the greater the wealth divide across the globe.
Meanwhile, China has unveiled its strategy for weaning the country off fossil fuels. China says it'll follow through on its promise to reach peak carbon emissions in 10 years. CGTN's Zhou Jiaxin reports.
For decades, coal in China, the world's biggest developing country, has been a major source of energy security. To tackle global warming, China has pledged to cap the fossil fuels, even while facing an energy crunch.
Clean and low-carbon energy is crucial to future sustainable development. In recent years, China has been largely adjusting and upgrading the energy structure by diverting heavy reliance on coal to low-carbon consumption.
China says it had decreased the proportion of coal in the mix from 72% in 2005 to 57% in 2020. And for the first time, the installed capacity of renewable energy is expected to surpass that of coal-fired power generation in 2021.
China has integrated those emission reduction targets into its broader social and development planning and strategy, and with those combination of command and control policy together with market-based policy and also standard policy to deliver its target. For this year, China has launched the largest carbon trading scheme in the world to increase the cost efficiency of those policy and matters.
This September, China told the UN it will halt new coal projects overseas. To fill in the energy vacuum, China vows to step up wind and solar power. 1.2 billion kilowatts in its total installed capacity by 2030, also a test of the resilience of its electricity network.
Indeed, it seems to be a very harsh and difficult target for China. But I think it is feasible given the experience of China to reduce carbon emission in the last decade. If we keep the pace, we can achieve the target for 2030.
And that target compared to the 2005 level is to lower its greenhouse gas emissions per unit of GDP by over 65%, while increasing the share of non-fossil fuel energy consumption to around 25%.
Achieving the peak of carbon emission is an integral part of China's ecological civilization. That means it is the internal demand to make weather clean, to prevent global warming. That's very important.
Ahead of this week's climate conference in Glasgow, China says parties should continue their support for poor countries in funding, technology and capacity building and transform goals into action. Zhou Jiaxing, CGTN, Beijing.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, environment campaigners clash with the UK government over plans to drill for more oil.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Climate change is happening right now. World leaders prepare for vital talks that will change the course of humanity. Action could save millions of lives. Failure could cost many more. Do they have the will to act quickly? Does the planet have the time to wait? Follow full coverage from the COP26 climate talks here on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
The UK has warned France it has 48 hours to back down in the row about post-Brexit fishing rights, or it'll take legal action. The ultimatum comes after France set a Tuesday deadline for more licences to be issued for their boats to fish in UK waters. Let's talk to our correspondent Giles Gibson watching the story in Brussels. Giles, why has Britain issued this ultimatum?
Well, Jamie, it appears that the two sides are moving away from these kind of ultimatums and that they are inching towards some sort of a compromise. There are talks ongoing as we speak between representatives of the French, the United Kingdom, the European Commission, as well as the Channel Islands, which are not technically part of the UK, but their citizens or their residents are citizens of the UK. This latest burst of diplomacy between the different parties follows some pretty undiplomatic language from the British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss earlier. Take a listen to what she had to say about the French.
Well, France has made completely unacceptable threats, first of all to our fishermen, but also to the Channel Islands in terms of their energy supply. And we need them to withdraw those threats. If they don't withdraw those threats, we are prepared to use the dispute resolution mechanism in the trade deal we signed with the EU to take action against the French. They have behaved unfairly. The fishing licences were awarded entirely in accordance with the trade deal we negotiated.
So clearly the two sides can't agree on fishing rights, but they also don't seem to be on the same timelines when it comes to this dispute, because the French have already said that if the UK does not grant more licences to French fishing boats by Tuesday, then they are going to bring in restrictions, including things like increased border checks, as well as blocking British boats from French ports potentially. So that warning about a 48-hour timeline is a little bit later than the timeline that the French are working on.
Meanwhile, the Northern Ireland Protocol is also causing tension between Britain and the EU. What more can you tell us on that?
Yeah, London is really fighting battles on multiple fronts when it comes to the aftermath of Brexit. And anybody who knows their history at all knows that that can be problematic. We've got this latest round of talks kicking off this week about the Northern Ireland Protocol. This was a key part of the Brexit withdrawal agreement. It meant that Northern Ireland kept some parts of EU rules, including on things such as food standards, so that they could avoid this hard border between the Republic of Ireland and the Northern Ireland. The UK, since the Brexit agreement, and especially in recent weeks, has been saying that this protocol is causing lots of disruption for trade, and it wants to completely renegotiate it, particularly the fact that the European Court of Justice has oversight of any potential disputes. The UK wants to scrap the ECJ's role in this. As this latest round of talks has kicked off, the European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic has told the Daily Telegraph newspaper in the UK that the UK must not embark on a path of confrontation. So you have the British government really trying to put out these fires, trying to hold these negotiations with the French and also with the EU as they're trying to broker this historic climate change deal in Glasgow.
Giles Gibson in Brussels, thank you very much.
The United States Treasury Secretary has denied putting pressure on Ireland to sign last month's global corporation tax deal. Janet Yellen, who is currently visiting the country, says she held productive meetings with Finance Minister Pascal Donoghue in the lead-up to the agreement. It will see a minimum global corporate tax rate of 15% for big companies and means Ireland will give up its prized 12.5% rate for multinationals. Paul Colgan is economics correspondent at Virgin Media News in Dublin. I asked him about the significance of Yellen's visit.
Well, it's been a traumatic experience for the political establishment in Ireland over the past 6 to 12 months. The OECD process really had put unrelenting pressure on Ireland to sign up to a new global minimum corporation tax rate of 15%. Ireland, historically, for the past 2 decades, has had a 12.5% rate, well publicised, well advertised, and it's been a central pillar in bringing big, in particular US multinational companies to Ireland, where they've established sizable European headquarters and they employ thousands of people. And the concern has always been that if Ireland were made to lose that corporation tax rate, it would no longer be such an attractive place for these big US multinationals who not only employ many people, they also pay a significant corporation tax bill, and that is going into the Irish public finances and helping indeed the Irish government through this very difficult period of time. So her visit here today, I think in some ways, is to help Ireland perhaps present itself in a slightly new light. It's now going to sign up to this 15% corporation tax rate. Janet Yellen said today she understood, while previously it may have been very important to Ireland, she doesn't believe it is as crucial as it once was. And she says Ireland has a young, dynamic workforce. It's an English-speaking nation. And she believes that there was many other things that would make Ireland an open and, as she said, attractive place to do business. She said she reckoned it would remain one of the most attractive places to do business in the entire world.
So you said that politically Ireland felt it was a traumatic experience signing up to the global minimum corporate tax deal. How does it feel about it now?
Well, Ireland in many ways was left with no other option. At the very end, there were signs of small diplomatic victories for the Irish government. They got reassurances from the European Commission and their OECD partners that the 15% would be the end of it, but that the Irish government would not have to sign up to further increases in the years ahead. So that was deemed to be a small victory in the face of what is, I suppose, a tactical defeat. But in terms of the day-to-day debate within Ireland, the political debate, it doesn't feature as highly as it once did. People have moved on. There is a housing crisis in this country, as there is in many other countries, and that takes up the vast bulk of political debate. But nonetheless, it was something that was deemed to be untouchable for decades within the Irish, by the Irish government. And at the same time, we've seen the opposition parties, as they say here, donning the green jersey. They rode in behind the government decision to sign up to this because they too recognised, in the face of such significant pressure, in particular from the United States, that Ireland really had no option. I put it to Janet Yellen this morning as she stood beside our Finance Minister, Paschal Donohoe, that there were reports that she had cajoled the Finance Minister along over the past 12 months, encouraging him to sign up to this deal in a series of pep talks. Paschal Donohoe is, of course, president of the Eurogroup, so he would have met Janet Yellen in that capacity on several occasions over the past 6 months. But she denied to me that it was a process of cajolement. She said Ireland and the US had engaged in economic diplomacy and were working together in partnership to make the global tax system sustainable and equitable as possible.
Barclays chief executive Jes Staley has stepped down after an investigation into his dealings with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The probe centred on the way Staley described his relationship with the dead financier to Barclays' board. The two men were in contact when Staley ran JP Morgan's private bank, where Epstein was a client. Staley previously said that he regretted any relationship with Epstein, who took his own life.
Irish budget airline Ryanair is considering delisting from the London Stock Exchange because of Brexit. Chief Executive Michael O'Leary says it's likely to happen in the next 6 months as the airline looks to comply with EU rules mandating airlines are majority owned by EU nationals. The revelation comes as Ryanair posted a quarterly profit for the first time since 2019, but warned it still expects to make a loss for this year.
Workers at 7 Amazon warehouses in Germany have gone on strike over pay and conditions. The industrial action will last until Tuesday. The labour union Verdi has demanded Amazon raise pay in line with other retail and mail-order companies in the country. Amazon says it pays its workers well above Germany's minimum wage.
China has applied to join DEPA, the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, a group founded by Singapore, New Zealand and Chile in 2020. It's the world's first such agreement seeking common approaches to digital trade issues. China said joining the group is in line with efforts to deepen reform and further open up its economy.
Well, it's back to business as usual in Lisbon. The largest in-person tech event since the pandemic has begun in Portugal's capital after a 2-year break due to the pandemic. Around 40,000 delegates are attending the event, and our correspondent Rahul Pathak is there for us. Rahul, real life returns then. Tell us more about this year's summit.
Well, I can tell you it's certainly well attended. It's about to start in about half an hour's time. And if I could just move out a shot and my cameraman Gabby can give you an idea of, that's the queue of people waiting to get into this summit and actually replicate. There's another queue even bigger on the opposite side of this shot. And as you say, around 40,000 delegates expected to attend this particular event. But what exactly is Web Summit 2021? Well, essentially, it began in Dublin 9 years ago, not 2021, but the original event, and it moved to Portugal and Lisbon in 2016. And it's essentially a big networking opportunity for big tech companies like your Amazons, like your Facebook, and for the smaller startups. And it gives them an opportunity to meet with investors. And in fact, on the app, you have all these keynote speakers. You can actually schedule a meeting with these keynote speakers if you want to get in touch with them to help with your business. Now, it's up to them whether they want to get back in touch with you. But it is all about getting these people together, and it's regarded by most people within the industry as the biggest and most important tech events in the world. Now, as you have often with these kinds of events, there's a healthy dose of celebrity stardust here as well to attract the likes of us to come along. In the past, you've had the UK Prime Minister Tony Blair giving a keynote speech, U2 frontman Bono. This year, you've got Thierry Henry as one of the speakers later on in the week, and also the former UK Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg will also be speaking later on this week. Jamie?
Rahul, it sounds like there's some amazing people there, but these are challenging times for big tech all around the world. Governments are falling out of love with many of these companies, aren't they?
Well, that's right, and that's actually in keeping with the main keynote speaker today will be Frances Haugen, who many of you will remember as the Facebook whistleblower. Earlier this year, she released documents that was suggesting, she's a former Facebook employee, of course. She released a document that suggested that Facebook was essentially lying about its efforts, about the effectiveness of its attempts to cut down on hate, violence and misinformation on its site. And her speech will officially open this year's event, which, as I said, is about to open in about half an hour's time. And what's interesting, I mentioned Nick Clegg before. Now, he'll be speaking a little bit later, but he'll be speaking in his current role as Facebook's Global Vice President of Communications and Global Affairs. So I'll be fascinated to hear his take on the issue. I'm pretty certain that he'll be asked a couple of questions on the Facebook whistleblower and what she'll have to say today. Jamie?
Rahul, thanks for that. Rahul Pathak there for us in Lisbon.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Thailand is back in holiday mode as it reopens to vaccinated tourists from 60 countries.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots.
France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year.
France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top story, digging our own graves, the dire warnings as world leaders gather in Glasgow to confront the climate emergency.
Staying in Glasgow, and COP26 has been billed as the last best hope to get a grip on the climate crisis.
The gathering of thousands of delegates came amid heavy storms across the UK, making travel for some very difficult. Here's Juliet Mann again.
This is the first physical event of its kind since the emergence of COVID-19. And it's crowded, which is why I'm here and not in there. The queues to get through the gates, let alone security, are 90 minutes long, which isn't any good for a journalist with a deadline. 25,000 people have accredited. There are 10,000 police officers and around 1,000 volunteers in and around the area. And as you can probably hear, a lot of people with a cause that they're here to shout about. It is a lot of people, and that's why there are COVID protocols in place everywhere. Now, I was able to get inside when I registered yesterday on the first day, and everyone is given one of these, a COP26 hygiene kit, and this is just part of being really COVID aware. We have to wear masks inside the venue, but let's have a little unboxing and see what we've got. You might be thinking, hang on, unnecessary packaging, but the good news is it's all recyclable, and inside the venue there are boxes everywhere for every sort of thing. Everything is reusable, and there's nothing really there that is going to add to landfill. So I've got some hand sanitizer. Yep, we've got to keep clean hands. We've got some wipes, if you're wondering about those. These are fully biodegradable, and also it all can be reused. And there's one more thing in here. This is my face covering. I've got a feeling it is my official, yes it is, an official COP26 face covering. I'm going to need this. That behind me is the blue zone, which is UN territory for the duration of the conference. And that means it's going to be patrolled by armed UN guards. Security levels are at their highest. Inside, it's a chance for world leaders and climate change specialists to sit at the same table, eyeball to eyeball. We're talking about the poorest, most vulnerable nations sitting across from some of the world's biggest polluters, demanding answers. But the climate conversation is happening all over the city.
We're actually playing our host city chamber role on behalf of British Chambers of Commerce and the international network that we have as well. So we've been leading a lot of the work in climate change around circular economy and trying to inspire our business community to embrace that as a way of becoming innovative and creating innovative solutions, and also future-proofing their business before all the regulations come through. So whilst we are incubating some of these solutions here in Glasgow and in Scotland, a lot of these solutions can be taken out to other cities globally, because that's where all the critical mass of populations and business and consumption is happening, which is really important to remember.
Whatever commitments are made, COP26 isn't the end point to net zero. It's more of a launch pad for tangible climate action. Paris promised, now Glasgow needs to deliver. The words of Alok Sharma, the COP26 president, and it's his job to make sure delegates and negotiators do just that. Juliet Mann, CGTN, Glasgow.
Well, the UK says it's setting the pace globally on environmental standards, but campaign groups think otherwise.
Some believe the country will find it impossible to meet its Paris climate commitments because of its continued drilling of oil and gas. CGTN's Guy Henderson reports.
At the height of its mid-century oil boom, Britain was producing 1 million barrels of oil a day. Nowadays, it's a net importer, but the industry's still going. Indeed, it believes it still has a vital role to play in the country's economic future.
Well, we can see even now in the current market dynamic that having assured supplies of oil and gas through the winters and indeed through the seasons to come is important.
Europe's been hit by record energy prices this autumn, and Britain's no exception. That's left some believing the UK must continue to produce and even keep finding more of its own oil and gas, albeit under strict new emissions regulations, as it works to build its own renewable capacity. Campaign groups are determined to stop that from happening. Indeed, they're backing a legal case by a former oil worker who argues such a move would be illegal.
Secretary of State, we're taking him to court because basically we believe he's being irrational in the face of the government's commitment to the Paris Agreement to actually contemplate taking new oil and gas out of the North Sea.
They'll be taking that message to Glasgow.
So the idea that you can have a climate compatibility check on a new gas field or a new oil field or a new fossil fuel exploration just doesn't, it's ridiculous. It's like, you know, checking a rock for a heartbeat is the same as like checking a new fossil fuel project for climate compatibility.
The pressure on governments around the world is growing and growing. Britain often claims to be leading the way, But it too faces what some see as its own dilemmas, others as a clear-cut choice. Guy Henderson, CGTN.
The Taliban has called for environmental programs funded by the UN before the group took power in Afghanistan to be honoured. The plea came as the Taliban released a recording of their supreme leader making a rare public appearance. There had been speculation that Haibatullah Akhundzada, who had not been seen since August, was dead.
The Prime Minister of North Macedonia has resigned after his party suffered losses in local elections. Zoran Zaev conceded defeat after the Social Democrats lost the capital, Skopje. Zaev has led the country since 2017 in a coalition government. The leader of the opposition is calling for a snap election.
An investigation is underway after a number of people were injured when two passenger trains collided near the British city of Salisbury. The crash happened after one of the trains struck an unknown object in a tunnel, causing its carriages to derail. A high-speed passenger train then crashed into it.
One person has died after a cable car became detached and plunged to the ground in the Czech Republic. The victim in Sunday's incident is believed to have been a member of staff operating the cable car, which travels to the top of a 1,000-metre-high mountain near the city of Liberec. 14 people on board a cable car travelling in the opposite direction were rescued.
China has reported 92 new COVID cases, including 59 local transmissions. Most were found in the north of the country. The new outbreaks have prompted the government to step up tests and close some venues. Shanghai Disneyland shut temporarily after reports that one person tested positive after visiting the previous day. The uptake of COVID-19 vaccines in Britain has slowed down. And to try and avoid a fourth wave of infections this winter, the government has opened walk-in clinics where no appointment is needed to get a booster jab. Well, let's talk now to Michael Voss. So, Michael, 2 jabs isn't enough then. We need a booster, do we?
Robin, there have been numerous studies in the UK, the US, Israel and Qatar, which all show that after 6 months, the effectiveness of 2 vaccines starts to decline. The most common figure banded around is for Pfizer, which went down from 88% to 47% protecting against COVID, with similar results for the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, there's also mix and match. They're finding out that if you give a different vaccine to the original ones, that seems to work just as effectively. For example, I had my booster jab just over a week ago. My first 2 were AstraZeneca. The most recent one was a Pfizer jab. And now the government wants to get as many people as possible to go into these walk-in clinics to get their booster jabs.
Anyone over the age of 50 who's had their second dose of vaccine more than 6 months ago can now turn up for their booster jab at walk-in clinics. The effectiveness of 2 doses appears to start falling after 6 months. Only around half of the 12 million people eligible for a third booster vaccine have taken up the offer, hence the new walk-in clinics. Back in July, the government decided to end almost all COVID-related restrictions, calling it Freedom Day.
We're setting out on what I hope and believe is a one-way road to freedom.
Since then, cases have been rising and the government does not want to reintroduce restrictions such as the compulsory wearing of masks in crowded indoor spaces. So the UK government is hoping increasing vaccination rates will be enough to limit hospital admissions if there is a fourth wave of the pandemic this winter. Despite Britain's vaccination programme, the number of people catching COVID remains higher than in many parts of Europe. Latest figures show that in Britain there were almost 9,000 cases per million of the population at the end of October. Belgium is the closest with almost 7,000 cases per million, while Germany, France and Italy are well below these figures. And in terms of the number of people dying from COVID-19, Britain remains top of the list, with more than 2,000 deaths on a bi-weekly basis. That's almost double the number than Germany and significantly higher than France and Italy. Belgium, which has a high number of infections, has the lowest number of deaths. The UK's vaccination rollout for 12 to 15-year-olds is lagging behind several other European countries, and teenagers are also being encouraged to use these walk-in clinics. Vaccination teams are also going directly to schools. Meanwhile, the UK eased its travel rules on Monday, removing all the remaining red list countries. Until now, anyone entering the UK from a red list country, even those fully vaccinated, had to pay to quarantine in a hotel. Now they just need to take a COVID test on day 2.
So, Michael, will the government's booster campaign be enough to get vaccination rates up?
Well, I think for the over 50s, at the moment, it's hesitancy, inertia, if you like, rather than vaccine hesitancy. If you've already had 2 vaccines, you're not exactly an anti-vaxxer. With the 12 to 16-year-olds, I think there is more hesitancy and people are more reluctant to take up these vaccines. I think the other side is that Britain opened up. Life returned very much to normal, much faster than most other countries. Pubs, bars, restaurants, cinemas, sporting venues are all open. You don't need to wear masks. You don't have to show vaccine passports, COVID passports, for example. So it's whether this will be enough with just the vaccine to stop this 4th wave in the winter.
Michael Voss, thanks very much.
Thailand has become one of the first destinations in Asia to open up to tourists despite the pandemic. While the country is still averaging around 10,000 new infections a day, it's trying to revive its battered economy. Martin Lowe reports now from Bangkok.
It began with the Phuket Sandbox back in July, a bold experiment to allow in vaccinated tourists without quarantine. After a successful trial at the island, which brought in revenue and saw no spike in infections from abroad, the scheme was extended to neighbouring resorts. Now from November the 1st, the whole of Thailand is being opened up to travellers who meet basic conditions. Primarily, they have to come from 46 approved countries and territories, including China, the US, Australia and much of Europe. Vaccinated travellers from countries not on the list can also visit, but much like the original Sandbox, they have to spend the first week in Bangkok or one of 16 other designated tourist areas before being allowed further afield.
Let me give you an example. In Phuket, nobody could pay for their children to go to school. Then after 1 week of the Phuket Sandbox, a mother who owns a restaurant came and paid her child's school fees from the money she'd earned. That is helping Thai people 100%.
Thailand's international airports are preparing to screen visitors at the point of entry and say they're working to minimise delay. Tourists must take a COVID test on arrival and spend the first night in pre-booked accommodation. Some big hotels like this one have teamed up with hospitals to streamline the process by providing the COVID tests on site.
I think guests will love this. You know, what we've done is created a one-stop shop. So what we will do, we will organise a limousine to get them from the airport to the hotel, take them to check in, do the PCR test, and then they can go to the room. They wait in their room until their results come back, and then they're free to move around Bangkok as they wish.
Thailand is pushing ahead with reopening, even though it still has a sizable COVID problem. It says it can do so because vaccination rates are now high in tourist areas. And with the economy in tatters, it simply can't afford to wait any longer.
At stake is the income from millions of visitors who previously contributed up to a fifth of the country's income. Thailand knows other places are also opening up, and the scramble for tourist dollars has begun. Martin Lowe, CGTN, Bangkok.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Branching out and taking direct action, we meet a self-styled tree commando in Hungary.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Japan's Prime Minister says economic recovery from coronavirus is his priority as he outlined his policy plans after Sunday's general election victory.
Fumio Kishida's ruling Liberal Democratic Party had faced criticism over its handling of the pandemic, but it defied expectations, comfortably securing a majority. Phoebe Amoroso reports from Tokyo.
It was a tense night for the Liberal Democratic Party. Exit polls suggested that they could lose their single-party majority, but in the end they secured 261 seats, comfortably above the 233 required. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida claimed the results gave the LDP a strong mandate to lead.
The lower house election is the election for the nation to choose which party to lead this country. It was challenging, but I really appreciate that the nation showed their willingness to have a stable politic under the LDP and Komeito. Under my administration, I believe they expect us to build the future for the country. I will work even harder.
However, apathy among the public is widespread. The turnout was just under 56%, the third lowest in the post-war era. Few were surprised at the outcome, as the opposition parties are viewed as lacking credibility.
At the end of the day, we have no other parties that we can trust, so we have to choose the LDP.
Yesterday's election results were basically what I expected, although I thought the Liberal Democratic Party would lose some seats due to the handling of the coronavirus.
Investors, however, were relieved, as the results are likely to bring a period of political stability to Japan. The Nikkei share average jumped 2.25% on the news.
As COVID-19 cases have plummeted, life is slowly starting to get back to normal here in Japan. Now the focus is whether the LDP can deliver on that promise of restoring the economy.
Kishida has said he will decide on economic measures by mid-November. He has promised a stimulus package worth trillions of yen to support the economy after the pandemic hit businesses. He has also announced plans for what he calls new capitalism, which he says will reduce income inequality and raise wages. Some believe the election results will give him more power to push the party in a different direction from previous administrations.
If you look back at the time before the election, Kishida had to accept quite a lot of the policies that were advocated by Abe and Suga and Takaichi, and they were not really part of his own agenda. Now that he has performed quite well in this election, I think there's space for him to really push a little bit more with regard to his own policy.
Prime Minister Kishida has promised to move swiftly to implement his plans, and analysts say he'll need to. Japan faces an upper house election in July. The LDP lacks a sole majority in the chamber, relying on Komeito to pass the 50% mark. The vote looks set to be a tougher battle. Phoebe Amoroso, CGTN, Tokyo.
Well, as leaders gather in Glasgow to try to hammer out some kind of climate deal, many people around the world are asking how they can make a difference.
For our special COP26 coverage, we've asked people to keep a video diary of their efforts to live without creating waste. Today we head to Nigeria, where Emmanuel Ojiehevwe is going to a market to buy groceries.
Okay, we're about to go to the market now to get some foodstuff from a local market just nearby. And we are taking some bags with us to the marketplace. The local market is where we get some things where they sell to us just directly. They don't put it in a container. It's not sealed. It's not in any plastic container or whatever. But once it's sold to us, we have a container where we store those things.
And to learn more about the Zero Waste Challenge, head to CGTN's Facebook page.
Around the globe, environmental campaigners are taking the fight against climate change into their own hands.
In Hungary, András Györfi, a self-styled tree commando, is leading a tree planting initiative in the country's capital, bringing people together using social media. This is his story.
My name is András Györfi. I'm 38. I'm from Budapest. I studied biology. I've always been passionate about nature and trees. In December 2020, during the lockdown, I decided to start a Facebook group called Tree Commando. Within a few weeks, 400 or 500 members joined from all around the world, expats living here in Budapest. We're working with local municipalities and we plant trees. This is how we fight against climate change. I personally planted a few hundred trees in my lifetime, and the Tree Commando Facebook group is at a few dozen trees right now, but we also took care, meaning cleaning, of a few hundred trees all around Budapest. This is one of the trees I personally planted. This is from China, and the interesting story about this tree is that in China, when a girl is born, they plant one of these trees, and by the time she gets married, they cut it out to create furniture for the young couple. Of course, I hope this tree will not be cut out for a few decades. This is another tree I personally planted. This is my favorite species. This is the so-called Sequoiadendron giganteum. This species can live up to 1,000 and in some cases probably even up to 3,000 years. It's from California. The General Sherman tree, which is the biggest living organism on Earth, is way over 100 meters tall. So they grow like crazy. And that one too behind me, it was this big last year when I planted it, and look at it now. So that's the amazing thing about trees. I believe the best way to fight climate change is to plant trees where the carbon emission is the greatest problem. In urban areas, you know, because if you go out to the woods, you have a lot of trees, you have nice air and so on. But in urban areas where most cars are going around us, as you can see right now too, it's crucial to maximize the amount of trees. My message to the COP leaders is that they have to introduce drastic measures. There should be a quota on the amount of miles anyone can travel annually. A lot of devices that are completely useless should be banned. For example, the drying machine. Your clothes are gonna dry perfectly if you just hang them out in the living room. I think world leaders should incentivize companies to rationalize their processes because we're running towards hell, right?
What a lovely story. The headlines again. The United Nations COP26 Climate Summit has opened in Glasgow with dire warnings about the climate emergency. The UN chief Antonio Guterres told world leaders that humanity is digging our own graves by failing to act fast enough.
Well, that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on Smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.